I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, thank you all. I appreciate all your attendance here this evening. This is now our third meeting, two as a group, as a committee, and I appreciate all the input that we've made so far on this serious work with police reform. So thank you. Now, you've got a packet tonight from the chief reflecting some of the guidelines and some of the work that we'd like to strengthen over this evening. But up to this point, have you had an opportunity to read the last information packet that we had put down?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, sir. Can you hear us? You can't hear anybody? Sorry. I apologize. I can see you and I can hear you. You can't hear me, right? Okay. I'm going to try to see if I can fix that. Let's see. Can you hear me now? Instead of speaking of this microphone, you should be hearing me. Appreciate it. Sir, can you hear me now?
Can anyone hear you? Or just one person?
I can hear him. He cannot hear us.
Okay, I can't hear you.
Yeah. You cannot hear us, correct?
No.
Nancy can hear us.
Nancy, can you hear us? Oh, Nancy can hear us. Oh, so maybe it's on your side, Dave?
He might need to go out and go back in, sometimes.
Or, yeah, exit the...
He might want to log out.
Okay, why don't, can you text him and try to see if you can log out and try to log back in? Nancy can hear us. I didn't realize that. I should raise that.
Well, I'm just going to do her.
I'm going to log back out.
Yes,
And I'll log back.
thank you. I'll keep an eye out for it. Okay, so let's move forward. I apologize. This Zoom hasn't been playing nice. I was just asking, we left the list open, have you had an opportunity to read the last packet that we had sent on to you? And any comments about what we've sent or what we presented so far that the board or the committee would like to discuss first before we begin tonight's work?
Last meeting, we got a little off track, but I think it was a good discussion about communities between the police and the community.
Yes.
Because we're all here because we don't want to see what happened in other
identify issues, comprehensive review of our practices, our policies. That's why I've submitted in small portions. We have approximately 110 policies with several hundred standards as part of accreditation. We want to identify and focus on specific topics, some that are directly identified in the New York State Reinvention and Collaborative Reform Guidebook, but also it's not a one-size-fits-all, like we said at the first meeting and second meeting. So every community has different needs and different items to focus on. So part of the meeting we're discussing is, I think the first meeting was more of an overview of the community we serve, the police department, our functions. The second one, we started focusing on certain topics that were directly picked from the table of contents, which is essentially the first page of the guidebook. And if you see what we submitted this time, besides the worksheet that was previously submitted the first, or our last second meeting, this has more guided questions to expand a little bit more into each topic. And we can see where we need to improve, where we have improved. There's always room for improvement. If we're not looking at reform, then something went wrong. But I think every community, every police department has different forms of improvement. Some need increased policy, some need to get more community-oriented or policing-oriented. You know, there's a lot of different. So our goal with this meeting, I would say this third meeting, second with the committee, would be to identify and focus on certain topics that we realize we need to do better or work on. And some of those topics will have short-term and long-term goals. So we can always develop, when we start working towards our plan that we will submit to the state, it's a bottom-up approach. So it should, the information and the needs should come from our committee members, our public, the survey that we disseminated, to include comments that are receiving at Village Hall, if anyone wants to email. It's a bottom-up approach, so what we will look to do once we conclude our meetings is compile all the information that we've received through all our meetings, through survey results, and draft a plan, present it to the public, what we see or what we're looking to work on, and what your recommendations are, and see if the general public might have additional input. Our first meeting was open to public comment, and we received some feedback. I have some responses to some of the questions that were asked. We incorporated some of the public's, or you can say some of the committee members' survey questions into our survey that we distributed to the community. So everything we're doing is all working towards getting the most information possible so that when we draft our plan, it's an accurate depiction of where we need to improve and reform as a police department. Thank you.
Okay, any other opening comments or questions to the last meeting? If not, we left it off. Chief, did you want to first go to the survey update where we're at?
Yes. Okay, so everyone in their packet that was handed out a few minutes ago will have the survey results. And this is as of yesterday afternoon. Once we have, you'll see the packet with 24 pages. So since February 10th, I believe, confirmed approximately February 10th that the survey went out to the general public, we received approximately 111 responses that have completed the survey. If you want to take a minute or two just to look over the survey results, see if any responses, questions, or any certain demographics or information that stands out pertaining to the analysis of the survey, we could go over any questions. And just to reiterate, this is our first survey. As part of police reform, one of the recommendations, and we'll discuss further on as we get to certain topics, one of the questions asked is, does your police department complete annual community surveys? We did a few years ago, we did one, I believe it was approximately 3 or 4 years ago. We clearly did one now. That's one of the recommendations or topics we discussed a little bit more in detail.
You've heard the answers, the descriptive answers to questions 23. Do you have that data somewhere?
I'm sorry, question 20 or page 20?
I know, page 19,
Okay.
question, I believe it's question 23. Oh, that's the question 24, question 23, I'm not sure what it's.
You mean the comments from question 24?
It said, how satisfied are you with the response time of the police officers for time in progress? And then question 24, please comment on why you feel this way from question 23. 68 answered and 43 skipped. So I'm just curious what the feedback was.
I don't have the particular comments in front of me. It did not.
No, I was curious.
Give it an analysis. The only thing I can imagine pertaining to that question is it asks specifically response time to officers of crime progress. Maybe many of the survey takers have not witnessed or called the police for a crime in progress or had an emergency when they needed to have this response, so they did not have an accurate or wouldn't be able to give their opinion. And I know the percentages, you see it on page 19, the question starts on page 18 at the bottom. So question 23.
So is, for instance, page 22, maybe I did this one. So on page 22, question 28, what concerns you most about your neighborhood? Check all that apply, and that would be the list on page 23.
Yes, unfortunately, this printout right here is not one question per page. It can start the second question on the bottom of the page. So what I notice now is so what I would try to do is it's easier to process or to do when we release this and terminate or complete the survey and release it to the public. I will make it more reader friendly so it doesn't see page 1. I can see right out of questions 2 starts at the bottom of page 1, so we have to look over it.
Yeah, I guess the only one I have is that is the question 24. I don't see it is there's some sort of scale or percentages running there with an answer there. So I'm just curious if you can figure that out.
Was there any data that stood out or
For me, the one that kind of surprised me is question 28. What concerns you the most in your neighborhood? Gang activity is 8 people. It's the gang activity that kind of surprised me.
yes?
I didn't know if that was like a problem or just a fear. It's hard to
Yeah,
get.
it could be both. I think it gives us a direction. I know in the past few years we've had investigations that have led to potential or I don't want to say wannabe or ones that are affiliated with a gang. For example, we had 2 assault investigations where MS-13 name was mentioned. But in terms of gang activity, I think that question helps overall our patrol and investigation efforts, just to keep in mind we have several community members that are concerned with gang activity. And it could be as simple as quality of life issues, a lot of cars in the area, kids hanging out, in front of the house, and they might just assume or, but it's still something that,
Right. I'm not thinking of gang in a certain way, maybe someone is thinking of it another way.
and they're still 31 responsible for drugs, and what concerns of their community.
Yeah.
And with the approximate time period that the survey has been out to the public, it was also mentioned, I believe there was the photo used for the property. The Walter Store mentioned that the survey came through, I think it was, I believe that's photo used. Do we feel that we should, I could continue, leave the survey out for a longer period of time, or conclude it in the near future with the thoughts of this is going to be either annual or quarterly or as needed, process. Because I feel this gets out to more people than just asking for emails or comments to be sent into the village hall or to the police department. So I just wanted to pose that question to the panel to see if our thoughts on the time period that the survey has been out, the number of responses or approximate number of responses, and how long should we continue?
Anybody have any thoughts on it?
I don't know, it's semi-annual, at the beginning maybe. Well, it's kind of disheartening that 101 people answered out of how many people live in the village of Monroe. But that's the norm.
Yeah, I don't have our totals from our community survey we did a few years ago.
Right.
Unfortunately, I don't have that statistics, but I don't think it was overwhelmingly. I don't think it was much different than here. We've, I don't know. I think we could always look at ways to further enhance survey. I know not all surveys are friendly or easy to take, and maybe we change, the approach with the survey or change the questions. But I know based on analysis, the estimated time period to complete the survey, I think was approximately 9 minutes, 8 or 9 minutes. So they usually give you a graph to say that depending on the time period, you might lose more potential individuals that are looking to complete the survey.
I don't think it's a survey, I think it's just the people.
Okay. Yeah, that's,
Well, maybe what we could do is, before the next one, give people like not a warning, but on this date, so-and-so, give them like a few weeks to know that it's coming.
yeah.
And are we leaving it to just Village of Monroe, or are we leaving it to, I think when you're going to the other towns' papers, then it's...
Yeah, I can tell you based on some of the information here, the responses, you can actually see one of the questions.
There were some people that indicated the
But they can still be, a business owner, someone that they work here 20, 30 years. So we value their input. I can tell you that some individuals from our day-to-day operations at the police department don't know they live in the village or town of Monroe. They don't know they live in Blooming Grove. They just see Monroe, New York. They moved up there recently, and they call us for services. But if there are subject to have interactions with the Monroe Police Department, then by all means, their info would be valuable. It's just, I wouldn't want to speak for any other agency that, someone lives in a town of Monroe and the state police response, I would not want to guide them or have our police department guide them in a certain survey or possible service when it's two different agencies.
So would it be appropriate then to just keep the survey open? Maybe reach out to the one reporter story and see if we can get some press about this survey, and maybe get him to put some publicity to it. So maybe, photo news goes out to a lot of people, so that readership is pretty broad. Maybe we could ask him for some help in that end and encourage people to take the survey to really kind of get it. To Wayne's point, 111 responses. I would expect 1,000 maybe, which is really only about 14% of our population, 1,000. So, we've got less than 1%. So I think that's a good idea, and I think also too, this is a tool, and I think the tool should be used consistently. I think the tool will change and morph into different maybe questions as we develop a plan here on how to do better at policing, whatever that means right now. I think this survey and those tools will change a bit, because then we're going to be looking for people to respond to what changes we've made, and are we doing it? Are we getting it done? Are we representing the Village of Monroe and the people in the Village of Monroe as they need and see?
And I can tell you, within the last year, we changed our Facebook site or webpage, and prior to that, it had long been established. We had several thousand followers, and when we reviewed, we tried putting that out there as much as possible. And I think someone can confirm we're in a couple thousand range, early 1,000, maybe 1,000, 2,000.
So maybe Chief, like the mayor said, then, to continue the survey, have it out there, advertise it on Facebook if we have that many followers as well. Maybe another blast email from the village on their end, and then as well as to reiterate it to the photo news, another communication to go out. So we're encouraging people to complete the survey.
Chief, was it on your Facebook page, your Monroe PDs?
Yes.
Was it?
I think what we've done with the police reform, anything that has gone on in the village side, we've copied and pasted or put on our website as well.
Okay.
Our website, just so we're, and Facebook, we currently use Facebook, Instagram, and we have a webpage. So those are the three primary sources that we have. And if we look at the last question of the survey, the best way to reach out and get information out there, 58% of the responses, so 65 individuals to the website, 58% to the text messages, which same exact number, 65, 58 emails. Facebook is still pretty strong. Community forums. That's another thing that the future, we're looking to have more community meetings, and hopefully that'll continue to expand and more information go out. I know there's a few other surveys that are out in surrounding communities and nearby, with a lot of other agencies as well working on their police reform. So I know there's a few police reform surveys that are out. If you're living in Elizabeth Row, then numbers are expected.
All right, so then we're all agreed, keep it open, and as well, try to publicize it in the village sites and many social platforms we can. Okay. I'd like to get right into your packet. We left off where we left off was our next piece was fostering community-oriented leadership, culture, and accountability. That would be part of the new handout packet we all have.
Mayor, if you don't mind, I'd just like to go over a quick information or updates regarding our first 2 meetings and information that we're reinstating just for a few minutes. Civil service question at the first meeting. In some substance, someone asked about hiring some part-time and transition them into full-time. We asked for guidance for confirmation because we want to have the correct answer. And directed from a personnel management technician at the Orange County Department of Human Services Resources here in Orange County. Our question posed to the employee is a part-time police officer ever eligible to be placed in a full-time position without going on the list, which is the civil service police officer list. This came up at a police reform meeting, and one of the attendees wanted clarification as to the transfer from part-time to full-time. The response we received is the only avenue moving into a competitive position without being appointed off an eligible list is via transfer and or reinstatement. For example, say the person was a part-time police officer with your village, but was also serving as a New York State Park police officer. As long as they were permanent as a New York State Park police officer and you had a fully vacant position, they could potentially transfer to a full-time competitive police officer position, as they would be able to be drawn upon their competitive status with New York State. This is in conformance with Civil Service Law Section 70 and Orange County rules. A reinstatement scenario, another aspect of the person is a part-time police officer in your village and reside as a full-time competitive permanent police officer with the town of Newburgh less than 1 year ago. In this case, they could draw upon their previous permanent status as a competitive police officer and be reinstated to a fully vacant position within your village. Please advise if you have any other questions. I just want to clarify that when the gentleman mentioned about part-time and full-time and somehow not circumventing but working within New York State Civil Service Law, which is who Orange County Civil Service follows, I knew that not to be accurate unless that person had come from a equally civil or we can say classified or it meets the same requirements that Orange County needs for you to be placed on the list. So that was just a follow-up to one of the questions that was posed at the first meeting. Besides that item, on February 22nd, as part of the Department of Justice grant it's called Department of Justice grant request. In order for you to be placed on the list to possibly receive federal funding for your municipality, particularly for us, the police department, you have to meet certain criteria as part of, and I'll read the letter, so we can, it's dated February 22nd. Dear Chief Guzman, on behalf of the Division of Criminal Justice Services, this letter confirms we are certified that Monroe Village Police Department meets certain eligibility requirements set forth by the U.S. Department of Justice for discretionary federal grants. Monroe Village Police Department is qualified to receive federal grants for 3 years from the date of this letter. Pursuant to Section 2 of the Presidential Executive Order on Safe Policing for Safe Communities, dated June 16, 2020, Executive Order number 13929, this is the Executive Order on Safe Policing. The U.S. Department of Justice discretionary grant funding is only available to state, local, and university or college law enforcement agencies that have obtained or are in the process of seeking credentials certifying that they meet certain standards on use of force. The executive order on state policing empowers the U.S. Attorney General to designate independent credentialing bodies, including DCJS, to certify that a law enforcement agency meets the condition of eligibility for federal grants. Following our review, we have determined that the Monroe Village Police Department meets the conditions for certification. Accordingly, DCJS will include your agency going forward within our database of certified law enforcement agencies. Each year, we will provide the name of each certified law enforcement agency to the U.S. Department of Justice. I wanted to share this because not only at a national level, at a state level, but also at a national level, there's been requests and need for reform and changes in laws and use of force. We applied to be considered to ensure that our policy met the U.S. executive order in the Department of Justice, and we received a letter just a few days ago, February 22nd, saying that we've been approved. So I just want to share that on a note that working with the New York State Accreditation and part of the Department of Criminal Justice Services, that helps ensure that every year we're reviewing our policies, we're updating, and that our best practices are recognized not only at the state, but at the national level as well. Now, last but not least, one of the items we covered about procedural justice training, principal policing, which goes into implicit bias, procedural justice. We have 2 sergeants currently right now in the training trainer, so they'll be able to come back and not only train us, but also assist maybe neighboring agencies that need the training. It's something we believe in. It's the entire principled policing perspective to include, and I'll tell you what the training, what they're going to bring back to us, just so we have an idea of what they will be able to provide. And we're actually, I spoke to one of the sergeants this afternoon. We're looking to see if there's a public aspect of it. And according to one of the instructors, to better understand procedural justice, implicit bias, fairness, listening, impartiality, and some of the keys that are part of procedural justice, we will look to in the future, hopefully have a presentation to the public so they can better understand what our officers are learning real time. I know we've had Citizens Police Academy a few years ago. It's something that we would like to consider in the future. We would definitely incorporate this training because it's important. It's what we believe in. And just a quick summary as to what the training entails, and it starts growing through. Previously known as Procedural Justice 1 and 2, this name change more accurately reflects the concept of procedural justice and how it strengthens the relationship and trust between police agencies and the communities they serve. Principal policing focuses on the way police interact with the public and how these interactions influence crime rates and the public's view of policy and willingness to obey the law. Evidence shows that practicing procedural justice can have a significant impact on compliance, cooperation, public safety, and officer safety. During this 4-day training event, participants will learn the tenets of principal policing, gain a deeper understanding of the core concepts of police legitimacy, and to build better relationships with the communities that they serve. This training event will follow a train-the-trainer model, allowing local criminal justice agencies to train their own staff locally on a timeline that suits their own needs. All instructors are DCJS certified, principal police, and master instructors. The reason I mention this is most of our officers have attended the training, 1 and 3. It's a 3-part series of training, and we believe in it so much, and we know it's the importance of it that we've sent 2 sergeants to it. So now we will have a really good representation with it regarding in our police department to also incorporate some of it into the community.
Do you have something that you can share with the committee in that regard specifically? Maybe not tonight, but maybe a copy and everybody can take from what you're referring to?
Yes, I actually I have some. If it's okay, I know it's overwhelmed with emails. I have additional items that I'd like to share with the committee members from community-oriented policing services, COPS, and also from DCJS, and other sources. So I'd like to share of what that would detail.
Right. So what I'm trying to drive at here is that as as we're discovering and listening to the community and hearing each one of the committee members and going through this process, I want to see where the holes are and how we're going to make them right, and what policies and procedures and tools. And if that's a tool that can help us understand better what the next step for you all are, then I would like to see them, we'll have it, so that we can say, this is something that we're implementing. We sent 2 sergeants out for training, and we hope to have them come back and then, take care of the whole department, and this is what they are. So we
Yes, they're attending training this week, and they'll be completed training by the end of this week and certified.
Okay, thank you. Did the update of the survey, training date. You want to go into the package sheets, if you have something else?
No, and I apologize as we continue this dialogue and discussion that we repeat or move from one topic to another. Our first meeting, to include the presentation and the information I posted covered, some of the material will be repeating, but also our second meeting also went into additional topics. So at times, between policies that we're discussing, to include information that's already been disseminated, it's going to seem either repetitive, but we can always look at it and say, let's continue working on this. So we're focusing on certain topics, and if we cover a certain topic and we feel that it's consistent with best practices, we can move on to potentially to another topic that we're improving on.
So we want to start with the 4th committee area leadership?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so Roman numeral 3 on page 3 talks about leadership and culture. And it asks a relevant question: is your leadership selection process designed to produce the police community relationship you want? Chief, I'd like to know your point of view as I look at that first question. When it talks about the selection process, if you could just explain to the committee what it is what steps you take to identify, because that's how I'm reading this. We're talking about the leadership in the department. So what steps you make in your leadership to produce those officers that will bring themselves out into the community and to continue developing that relationship with the community. What does that say to you?
Regarding leadership of the department, as I mentioned in our first meeting, I started my career as in a community policing unit. I have it's near and dear to my heart. I've had a lot of great experiences with community councils, neighborhood block watch, youth coalition, bigger area, larger agency. However, it can still apply here on a day-to-day basis. In terms of leadership, our promotion within our department, we clearly have the civil service aspect that we identified, but we're always looking to put the best possible individuals in the right positions, because if not, then it's a trickle effect, and it's really hard to recover from it with civil service restrictions. They say supervisors, you don't want to put a round peg in a square hole, so that you're essentially setting someone up for failure. But we're always looking to promote on potential and merit-based, and that includes putting individuals that are community policing oriented. Because our community, we feel, is great support of the police department. I know we're in a police reform meeting now, and we need to improve, and there's areas that we are going to. However, the men and women of the Monroe Police Department that transfer here, because we've all transferred from one police department to another, they've come here for a reason, and it has to do with community they're serving. Either they were born and raised here, or they saw a potential here. So with our leadership, besides not putting me aside, as the board had a thorough selection process, and in 2019, I was appointed chief of police. I would just like to say on that topic that it's important to have individuals that share the same mission, the goals and objectives of the Monroe Police Department, and that is community policing oriented. And we've not only said it now because we're in the police reform process, but we've done outreach meetings for many years, Hispanic community outreach meetings, Coffee with a Cop, Citizens Police Academy, community surveys. What you're hearing now with some of those items I just mentioned, people may look at that and say, oh, well, other police departments are doing it. Well, they might be doing it now, or they might have done it for many years, and I've called before, but we have been doing it for many years, and we're going to continue doing it. Last year was a very uncertain year, so some of our events we were unable to have, but we definitely look forward to continuing those net fasting with community policing.
Having said that, I'd like the committee to, looking at leadership and culture, if any one of those questions brings a question or a comment or a thought that you'd like to see us talk about before we move on to tracking and reviewing. So, I'll put it up to the floor.
Yes.
Is something that you plan to do more periodically going forward?
Yes. Our first Citizens Police Academy was a great success. We had our graduates, we did a graduation ceremony for them. They learned a lot about our day-to-day operations, which is something that I wish we had more time. The committee members, we could go one day into a classroom, one day go into car stops or equipment in vehicles, one day into use of force or less lethal and defensive tactics. We tried scheduling a second one, and just because the number of people that signed up for the second one, we weren't able to. I believe at the time we were looking at least 15 individuals, so the first one had between 15 and 20, and the second one we couldn't, I guess, satisfy enough people to sign up for the Citizens Police Academy. But it's definitely something we want to do. And it's something that it's part of community policing, and I think it's something that there's a great value to it. If we have 20 attend the Citizen Police Academy, those 20 individuals will share it with their families, they share it with their friends and their neighbors, and before you know it, you have a few hundred individuals that know, either the challenges of being a police officer, because we know it's not easy, but also some of the things we look for, why we conduct ourselves certain ways, why we ask certain questions, why, is our approach at a traffic stop a certain way at nighttime. There's certainly a lot of information that can come from it, and we really look forward to, safety permitting, that we can do it in the near future, in the next few months, or even sometime in the summer or fall, depending on how we are.
And just suggest, I guess, if you plan to do like the summer or fall, I guess, the earlier you start advertising it, I guess the more it's out with you, because you've been on advance.
Absolutely.
Right.
We would probably look to give at least 2 months notice, and we have a target time period, and hopefully achieve as many students for the police academy, because I think it would be a great learning experience for everybody. I mean, in that police academy, I was one of the instructors at the Citizens Police Academy, and I learned stuff from the public who didn't know why we did certain things, or touch the trunk of the car when you're approaching, and some people say, hey, why do you guys touch the hood of the car, the trunk of the car when you're approaching the vehicle? Why do sometimes your officers approach passenger side or driver's side? There's a lot of information, and we exchange them, and we know what they're looking for, what are some of the things that go into their mind, and that's part of, I think, community outreach. we definitely look forward to it.
Chief, in regards to your talk before about the Coffee with a Cop program, are they different police officers that they have coffee with, or is it the same police officer, or? how does that
No, I can tell you that prior to becoming chief as sergeant, I was one of the principal officers, because I attended the training. It was at the Westchester County Police Academy. I attended Coffee with a Cop training with our chief of police at the time. And so you would always say you have 2 or 3 core that help plan it and organize it, and the rest would be different officers. At the time, we had some officers that were part of, I guess you say, a modified community policing unit, and we kind of rotated. So I can tell you, I don't believe we've had a coffee shop. We had 2 events, at least 2 events, and they're not the same exact officers. Some of the core, I guess, some of the planning, and some of the officers that would help distribute materials or organize the event, coordinate with the business owners. But we had one at McDonald's on 17N and Still Road, and another at now called Empire Diner, used to be called the Motor Planet. Yeah, so we had them there too as well. And we wanted to change locations so that not only do we get possible your routine customers that come in on certain days of the week, but we also had want to reach out to different communities. I think it's a form of community outreach, not only to the members that show up to have a cup of coffee with the officer, and just so everybody understands the Coffee with the Cop objective is just to, in summer at Coffee with the Cop event, you just walk in, there's coffee served, you sit down with an officer or officers, and you just discuss, the day-to-day, get to know them a little bit better. And you'll find out that typically you and an officer or also you have similar things in common and things to discuss, and the conversation, a lot of times they're asking, particularly for law enforcement, sometimes asking, hey, you know so-and-so, or you lived here, or you grew up here, and it's just one of those overwhelmingly positive events that, was great. And, there's Coffee with a Cop target dates that you usually do as part of, it's a community policing objective or thought that originated in California, and Hawthorne PD started it in California, which is, I believe, is outside Los Angeles, and it took off, and it's now it's international. So now there's Coffee with a Cop events throughout the world.
It sounds like a great program. The reason I ask, it's a great element as far as community policing is concerned, and as you mentioned before, having the right person for the right job. You want to have them obviously have coffee and talk to the person. Take myself, I'm cranky in the morning until I have my coffee, so that might not be the person.
No, there's no gender.
Yeah,
There's no gender. When we had our Coffee with a Cop events, there's no gender. We show up, we greet everyone. We had sergeants and other members actually serve in the drive-thru. So I remember some people got a kick out of coming up to get their order at the McDonald's drive-thru. There's an officer serving. When I took turns, so serving coffee with, making around and serving coffee. So, a lot of great, work to register. It was just a really, really good experience. As we know, last year was not an easy year to conduct any organized events. But we're gonna, once we pick up and, we get, for lack of a better word, still back to normal, we're just gonna skyrocket with all of our bicycle rodeos, our Coffee with a Cop events, the Citizens Police Academy, child passenger safety, and if you pharmacy drop off, or we have a bin, a dispenser in our police station, but also a lot of times that comes with questions or concerns with the elderly level. But our community policing objective will continue just to answer your question. Yes, we really look forward to that other idea or philosophy in community policing that we've had a lot of feedback from.
That sounds like a great program. One of the things is, part of community policing, but would you or the department consider having a designated community affairs officer? For example, I'm a downtown business owner, I'm a member of a faith-based organization, whatever it is. I may not have I may be a little reluctant, perhaps, to flag down a cop and express concern I may have, because I may not know who he is, we're not on a first name basis, whatever it is, but when I was in the city, every precinct had a designated community affairs officer where he was the point of contact, he was the go-to person, he or she was the go-to person for whatever concerns the community might have. And it was kind of a way of streamlining things to the department. To have that familiarity with an individual face a level of comfort.
Yeah, I would like to consider see what the panel thinks about the community affairs. We expect all our officers to be involved in the community in one aspect or another. We do have
Sure,
officers
with
that-
community affairs, absolutely.
Yeah.
The community policing, absolutely.
Yes, we have
some.
some officers right now that are assigned specifically to in-house internal responsibilities at the police department that are business contacts, emergency contacts. So what they would do is they'll routinely check a binder that we have for business owners and their contact information, and go out and say, hey, we would like for you to update. It's been a year, it's 2 years. We'll be spread so that sometimes we get calls at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and they're contacting the business emergency contact that was provided to you in your form that you request to have completed. Many times that person has not worked there, so we have to update that. So we're always reaching out to business owners and receiving good emergency contact information. So in case you get an alarm call, unfortunately this burglary or crime that occurs, we can reach out to the right person. But that's one of the things that officers are assigned to. But I understand your question with the community affairs officer designated. That's something that I will put in our notes and discuss.
It was just an idea.
Yeah, I think I kind of like that idea. I think sometimes continuity and consistency will help somebody who is developing that little bit more of a relationship. Is a comfort to that, is a connection. I think that's actually a good opportunity to have people.
They're all versed into community policing as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that would go a long way. So I would definitely support that. Chief, you had just mentioned something. I was looking at our packet that we first brought to the committee, actually the public, actually, under PowerPoint. I didn't see it, it's in here somewhere, but you folks have a lot of initiatives that you do. I think the baby carrier, the car seat program, and the rodeo, which is hugely successful. Do you have a list that you could also supply the committee as well? Didn't he have?
Yes.
It's something that you have to touch.
I'm going through it today.
Unfortunately,
Because that's a great tool to also identify. Oh, here it is. Community
Yeah,
outreach.
it's in there somewhere.
yeah, unfortunately, the presentation slide, PowerPoint slide.
So-
PowerPoint?
Yeah, the community, probably toward the back. But community outreach. I think as soon as possible, we want to get
Yeah.
it married.
This is toward the back, it's before these school resource officers. Talking to the class, birthday parade, volley parade, trunk or treat, Hispanic outreach, civilian police academy, great aggression and defense, hold on campus, child passenger safety, and feed the hungry. You guys do Toys for Tots too also.
What's the big Toys for Tots?
Yeah, I think that's, I get it's in here. I think part of our recommendations would be to, even if it's redundant, is to be able to say, these are our goals, and this is what we plan to continue. A goal could be still something that's in place, no matter whether we're going to step it up when we can get out of this COVID world. So I appreciate that as well. Okay. Chief, there's a question here that asks about your hiring and promotion process. The hiring process you just brought up with civil service.
We discussed in our first meeting as well, detail, reading the response from Orange County Civil Service. Our promotion, I think, obviously our promotion is based on anything from police officer hiring to sergeant to lieutenant, chief police, all have to be on eligible civil service, meet certain requirements in order to take the test. Detective is discretionary or based on merit without having a civil service rank.
Right.
So, police officer, but I think the important question with civil service is the reform or changes that I believe are going to come from police reform and other reforms. We hear about education reform, we hear about other types of reform. I think civil service will look and explore and see if there's ways to reform themselves in terms of maybe changes that could be made that will be easier to have a diverse department. I will give you just a quick statistics based on the last few weeks on our Orange County Civil Service list. There are approximately 314 eligible candidates. Of those 314, 56 are females, which represent approximately 17.8% on the list. Of the top 3 scores, as we discussed in our first meeting, you have to have a certain score to be eligible, and that score has nothing to do with, we can't circumvent it. We have a group of candidates that are eligible and they're in 100 or 95 range. You can't go down to 75 or 80 and grab a candidate that you feel will be the best for your department. There's civil service law that from the county to the state that we have to follow. And they'll help guide us as to who's eligible and who's not, and who can receive a canvas letter and be reached and hired than others. And just on the note regarding hiring, of the top 3 scores, 195 and 90, there are a total of 81 candidates. 11 are female, making that 13.58% of the top scores, you could say 195 and 90. And it's estimated in 2019 that there were a total of 12.8. So you can see that there's a slight increase from 12.8 to 13.58 eligible females on the list. That was one of the questions that was asked, and we went into some details about approximately nationally, about 87% of cops are males. And as you can see, this testing for Orange County list kind of was within that ballpark. But I think it's going to be changes, and it's been predominantly male dominated, I think, profession, but there's other professions that are lightweight, but it's something that I think with time you'll see a change. And I think it has to do with one of the items we identified is what we do as Monroe Police Department to hire. We usually say, okay, since we're a smaller agency, we have 19 full-time officers. If someone retires, we might have one retirement year, we might have no retirements in 3 or 4 years. It just depends on where we are as a police department, and what happens when we call for the list, we rather listen to interview who's eligible, rather than having maybe someone had mentioned maybe being a little bit more proactive with your recruitment. And I think what we're going to do is make sure that the materials that are posted on the Orange County website, we can put it on our webpage, put it out on social media as well, and maybe those can have it so we have more people taking the test. And I think that's going to be key to have diversity within the police department, not only gender-based, but also race or ethnicity, and also if they do present the test in a certain language of the application, maybe we can help some other communities understand a little bit better regarding the test requirements, and we just share the information. I think the first part is sharing it, and I think we've taken for granted that when we're looking to hire someone, because we're a small agency, we don't hire a whole lot of individuals at one time, and I mentioned, we might go a few years without hiring anyone. we kind of took for granted our role in maybe reaching out to the community as a whole to see if we can get a more diverse group of test takers. But we're going to need everyone's help, and that's part of us asking for help. And that's going to be reaching out to everyone in the community in all areas to see if we can get more individuals to take the test.
Is there any opportunity outside of the civil service? I know that's, it's a number. Score 100, you're going to get a phone call tomorrow. Score 70, you can wait a while. But are there other mechanisms and tools that you can utilize to try to attempt a hiring process other than just the test?
Well, I know some larger agencies, but they, again, cities have their own civil service commission. I've taken myself Spanish-speaking tests for City of Newburgh, City of Middletown, and Westchester County. I scored well on them, and it was, you certify your bilingual in writing, take the test in English, but there's a Spanish-speaking portion of it that you have to certify before they place you on the eligibility list. And for different municipalities, White Plains, it was a one-on-one interview with a Spanish-speaking proctor or instructor, and we had a conversation, and she said, okay, he's fluent, and I was placed on the list. City of Newburgh and Middletown had different requirements, but those are larger. I don't believe there's a Spanish-speaking list or test in Orange County. I've not heard of one. The only other caveat to staying with the ranking on the list would be a residency, and that would only pertain to those who are. And considering the list, we may have 2 individuals on the entire list. We might have 4, we might have 5, and it just depends. So it would be the residency list.
Just a question, and just the last go-around when you were looking to hire an officer, didn't you actually publicize it, the opportunity at the Village of Monroe, so anybody could have responded?
Yes, we put it on Facebook, and we received some responses. However, a lot of individuals may not know where, if they meet the requirements or not. But we did. We received a lot of MIP individuals and individuals from that were still required for the training. We did receive that, but a lot of times they're not eligible. And we spent a lot of time contacting civil service, just asking for clarification. Hey, we have someone that wants to transfer from a state university, or did they meet? Oh, we're researching it back to you. We have someone that has phase 1, they're looking to do phase 2 in the academy, which is phase 2 is more centered on certain training, and they might require additional training, and there's a whole process behind that. But there's a lot that goes into civil service. We do not at the Village of Monroe have our own commission. I know cities have their own, and but I think many of them, they're pretty consistent with Orange County. Or New York State, it has to be consistent with New York State.
I guess what I'm just trying to say, basically this last go-around was an open call to anybody. It could have been Goshen. An officer there could have applied here, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is that, it's asking that.
Yeah, so we put it out, and we have not, the Monroe Police Department sent anyone to the academy in many years. Everyone has transferred in from other agencies. But we all also look to see different times, the different approaches, and I think as our community continues to grow, we have to grow with it. And I think when we mentioned diversity within our police department, in the last 10 to 15 years, we've hired Black officers, we've hired Hispanic officers, we've hired Hispanic dispatchers. So we're continuing to improve, but we have room for improvement, and that's what we're going to look for our community partners to help us move. I guess not move, but maybe change the mindset if some people do not feel comfortable or just never thought about having a career in law enforcement. And that's going to be part of our positive interactions.
Well, I think whoever mentioned it, and finding ways to encourage people to come into this trade, to this industry, into this career path, right? So I think like the civilian patrol may be an opportunity. Maybe there's a high school initiative that could also offer that opportunity as well, to kind of wet your whistle a bit and kind of interact with that demographic, right?
Mayor, I believe BOCES does it right now in Orange County program. That's in coordination with Monroe Woodbury High School
Good. That's important.
for law enforcement.
I think those issues are really important. So that's to your end, Chief. So our goal then, I would think, an action would be to find ways to communicate out to the community as we get this done. More ways to incentivize and try to find people to get involved, take a test, take a civil service exam, things like that. Thank you. Okay, tracking and reviewing use of force and identifying misconduct. Chief, so this has been something we've all been talking about. I know you laid it out for us in your general orders.
Yes. In the general order, we discussed it in our first meeting to include submitting our policy, which includes an early review, immediate review, or notification of administration. I just wanted to pose a question to the panel. If you're familiar with our policy, our mandatory reporting, our requirements for a officer to notify supervisor down has to notify us. I will give you an example, and it's not an example that hasn't occurred, but I'll just give an example in general. If an officer involved in a use of force incident and there's injury to himself or to an individual, we will be notified and will initiate an investigation, review all use of force incidents, and as you can see in our statistics in our presentation, our use of force related to our actual officer service or arrest were extremely low. I could just the 2019 4 incidents in which force was utilized, total arrests 677, use of force less than 1%, 0.59 or 1%, and that is arrest. If you include our approximately 21,000 calls for service or our interaction with the community, that percentage here becomes a lot smaller. And we're reporting our use of force to the state as required. We're also going above and beyond in terms of documenting our use of force to include any hands-on, any need for brandishing your taser or warnings to. We keep that, which we're reporting, keeping our own statistics to include reporting to New York State DCJS. There's a portal, I believe it's going to be open to the public, and it will include every police department's use of force statistics. We've adopted a really aggressive use of force model in terms of reporting to supervisors so that in the event that there's an incident, we're made aware immediately, rather than, unfortunately, we saw recently where an agency found out later down the road, which maybe a few months, we would at least be aware and investigate immediately, and if there is alleged misconduct, we would take the appropriate steps afterwards. With our use of force policy, if everyone's had a few minutes to review it, I stated in the first meeting, just I won't read the entire policy because I know it's a lot. It's in General Order 24 of 20. That's was last updated. I believe it's part of last week's. It's everyone had. I have copies of those. Yes. discussed in our previous meetings the duty to intervene and report, where an officer has to report alleged or current active misconduct by an officer, and if it is a supervisor that is alleged to have committed that misconduct, then the next ranking officer will be notified. And this policy was considered for the United States Department of Justice grant, where we were recently certified, to include the New York State accreditation, which is a state agency. This is the best practice for the policy.
Chief, just define the EIS, early intervention. Is that mental disabled or mental issue, or that's specifically under the tracking? Does your department leverage early intervention system, EIS, to prevent problematic behavior? That's something that we have.
Yes, I'm sorry, you're referring to alleged misconduct or internal affairs? Are you on a use of force?
I'm under the tracking.
Oh, I see, okay. Internal, yes, we do. And that is in our internal affairs policy that was also submitted. One of the topics, or one of the questions I wanted to ask the panel, our policies have distributed a handful of them, or at least 6 of them. Our use of force policy is online, anyone from the public can view it. I was hoping to ask if there was a better way to, or it's a lot of policies, but if there's a better way to process, or if the panel feels that the community would be best served if they knew every policy, we could post them on our webpage.
Under a tab.
I'm sorry, yes.
Under a tab. I think communicating information in any form as complete as possible is really advantageous, I think, for the village or for the town or any agency. I think it's important. So if there's something that you could do to that effect.
Similar to the policies that are submitted that are what we would consider focus topics of the pursuit policy, internal affairs, use of force, bias-related incident policy that we have. You feel that the community in general would, for transparency and trust purposes, would feel a bit more understanding if all our policies were there, so they could always reference it to see if the officer followed the policy, or,
I think it could never hurt. I don't think you would have to go as far as in depth of publishing the entire general orders as far as like the organizational structure of the department, things of that nature. But more of the hot topic items, perhaps, like I said, vehicle pursuits, use of force, use of deadly physical force, bias incident, things of that nature, like you mentioned, more the hot topic issues these days.
so what we'll need to do, if the panel agrees, the GOs that have been distributed to the panel members, which cover personnel recruitment, internal affairs, pursuits, roadblocks, force continuum, which is the use of force, deadly physical force, which is governed by Article 35 of the New York State Penal Law, and bias-related incidents. If there's any other, we can start with those, so that everyone in the community has understanding of our policies, just a few of them, and we could always work on putting them all there's nothing in our policies that we would look to withhold. There's really nothing. You know, you think we have certain policies with confidential informant for drug investigations. Even that, I would include anyone's name or responses to active shooter incidents. We have policies for almost anything you could think of. We have policies, and I think that helps tremendously with consistency or guidance or direction for officers, sergeants, to include myself, so that if it's not followed, then you know that there's a break either in training, it might be a disciplinary matter, but you know, our officers are well trained in what we've done in the past and will continue to do so, either as we update our policies with pertinent details or recommended best practices from the state or at the federal level. Our sergeants review it at roll call, and we have the officers sign off. It's like a worksheet we do for each policy. So saying on this day, let's say at roll call, you would sit down with 3 officers, a sergeant, go over a policy or update, and have the officers sign off so we can now test that officer. And they appreciate it because now that makes them more knowledgeable and, you know, gives them the guidance and direction that they need.
Steve, I think you've spoken at length as well about the internal accountability within your department.
Yes, the one thing I would like to mention to the panelists, in our internal affairs policy, I added our complaint form. I was hoping that the panel would be able to review it to see if it's GO16, just to see if there's any changes. Our personnel complaint form right now is on our webpage and also in the front lobby of our police department. We also would accept complaints via telephone, via email, and I would look to, upon receipt, make contact with the complainant to gather additional details and more information and facts regarding this. If you look at how to make a complaint, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to go back for 1 second. You were talking about putting everything on the website, all your policies. There's a portion of our community that is never going to look on your website.
Yeah.
They don't go on Facebook. I would be one of them. We don't Facebook. We don't Instagram. We don't do that. But every week, we get the photo news. It shows up in our mailbox. There's a little blurb that tells you all the ambulance calls for the week and all the fire calls for the week. Would it be worthwhile to do a police blurb? Not, I know you already put in where you have the arrests,
Yes.
but like information of the week. You know, this is what deadly force is and when we would use it. And just to put it out in pieces as opposed to something like this, because when you give people too much at once, it doesn't sink in. But if you gave just a piece of information each week, I'm wondering if that would be a good way to put information out to the public. And even people could ask a question, you know, what, because you can go online with the photo news too, so they could ask a question through that. But it would be a weekly, hey, we're here, this is what we're doing, these are our policies, this is when we're going to be out in the community, you know, here's Officer so-and-so at Bike Rally, making yourselves more approachable, and let the community know what you're doing, transparency-wise, not only with like the bike rodeos and things like that, but these are our policies and procedures, and just a small blurb.
I missed, I'm sure you remember from way back when, in the photos they used to have the in your opinion section.
Yes.
And it would be, they'd catch you in front of the post office or shop, and they would ask you a question or something. And you go, oh, I know that person, and you'd read their name. We had talked about having some kind of like a Village of Monroe kind of corner or something where it's true, like, I didn't know that was happening. Where you could also put, like you're saying, the events, the coffee with the cop, because I do feel like there is something missing in that paper where you want a little section that's letting you know what's happening, what's
spotlight an officer every other week, or, spotlight an event, then spotlight an officer, but something coming from the police department each week saying, here we are. And even if I don't meet you at Coffee with a Cop, or I can still see the face and go, oh, I've seen her, but I never knew who she was.
Yeah, it's important for us to get better in, not only social media, but also, I guess you could say, public information in general. We have a public information officer, and we do have 2 social media pages, so our webpage, but we can follow the track the amount of visitors on our sites, and we don't get a lot, and I don't know, I know it's something that we need to develop ways to put up, and if it's positive, then it should be out. If it's negative, then we should still be transparent and have that discussion. And that's something that we promise to continue doing and do. If it's something that we were wrong or could have handled differently, then I think it's important to acknowledge it so that there's no theories out there rather than you're hearing it directly. There'd be times that unfortunately we wouldn't be able to, if it's possibly alleged criminal conduct, but in general, what we do as a police department is public service, so it's not very little would be considered, I think, would be considered confidential. Victims, obviously, certain drug investigations, certain things that we would come across, sexual assault investigations, any victim of any nature, but
Or any ongoing sensitive investigation.
yes, but our day-to-day is most of what we do is public, because our interaction are with the public.
What I think is, like Nancy said, is that the majority of the information that could come out of something like that, photo news, I mean, I don't do social media either. I don't do Facebook, I don't do Twitter, and Instagram and everything, mostly because of my career, but the majority of the news I get as far as what's going on in the village, what's going on in town is from the photo news, but I think that if that would be considered, I think the majority, probably 99% of the stuff that's going to go in that little section is going to be positive press for the department.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think
And I
that.
think in today's day and age, that's what we need more than anything, is
Exactly, I was
positive
going
press.
to say that. Yep. So if we can be that conduit to get that positive out there, as Nancy, Steve was saying, I agree, let's get it out there. That's really a great idea, including all these initiatives that we've been talking about. I think those are really important. And then kind of juice everything up again, kind of get the energy back. It's been a real difficult year, we doubt that. So this is a great opportunity.
And even like Nancy said, highlighting a particular police officer every so often, and maybe a great deed that they did, such as when they found that makeshift bottle, whatever it was, over by the mobile station 2 years ago. I mean, that's
Yes.
something big that we really want to highlight it. Whether it was a great arrest or somebody helping, a police officer helping another neighbor, or whatever it is, just a small thing. It's all positive press.
And we lost, recently with police reform and all the challenges that we've had, we lost some of our, I can tell you in terms of, not promoting stuff, but, speaking about some things the police department does, you sometimes forget, and you also forget ways that you can improve. And I think this reform meetings that we're having to include input from what we're doing, we're realizing better the needs of Monroe, Village of Monroe, and the community. But you sometimes forget that you should be proactive with the positive or the things you're doing, so that you have more followers, more in social
Listen,
media.
unfortunately, although the media is not going to put out the positive things as much as the negative things, because that's what sells. You want people to buy their papers, it's going to be the negativity, unfortunately. It's almost up to the department to promote itself in a positive aspect.
Yeah, I think to be proactive.
If the department was putting out something on a weekly basis, to kind of look for it. It also gives the department or the village the opportunity to put out the information that you're looking for people to have. You want to let them know maybe you have a new policy. In an effort to be transparent, here's our new policy, or, we got a new car, we have a new officer, anything that you want the public to know. And then you could also direct them to your website, but by putting something in the paper, you're giving the information. When it's on a website, you're making people search for it. They have to go to you to get it, as opposed to you putting it out to them. When they flip through the page, it's right there.
I'm sorry, I just want to ask a question, because with our Hispanic community outreach meetings in the past, we've had a great number of attendees, and then sometimes we've had slightly less. I just want to ask her, she understands you see her speak. I just wanted to make sure we're covering con las juntas que teníamos, la reunión, qué tiempo debemos tenerlo y cuando empieza el social media y el periódico, cómo podemos...
¿Puedo hablar en español y tú en
Sí. She has just said she'd like to express in Spanish, and just I'll translate.
Primero, me parece una herramienta muy conveniente las encuestas, que podemos ir de lo general a lo particular, tanto como lo queramos. En mi situación de la comunidad hispana, sería buena idea tomar una muestra de cierta población, los más representativos tal vez, conocer sus inquietudes, o tal vez darles la opción de, mira, aquí está una queja, pon ahí que era todo lo que quieras, tal vez anónimo.
¿Tú crees que la comunidad hispana no sabe el proceso cómo se hace?
Sí, lo que sucede es que en algún momento ellos tienen temor, ¿por qué no? No sé, eso sería bueno decirlo. Pero también tenemos la opción de, como comentaba la señora, de hacer de conocimiento de todo el mundo las cosas que a lo mejor son tan simples como decir, tú sabías que en la oficina de la policía hay una caja donde tú puedes reciclar medicina.
She seconded what you had mentioned about putting information out, did at the time. For example, she said for complaint process, putting that out there, maybe someone know, or prescription drug disposal that we have been. Maybe put that out there and go in maybe every week to go over some of the services we know. Are you okay? Or a gun lock safety program, or child passenger safety, or some more events. But putting that in, and I could work with her in the Spanish-speaking portion of it, because we have in the past translated documents, COVID-19 related documents or information. We've also put that information in our lobby, both Spanish and English, but it's one of the things she mentioned. She said the survey is a really good tool. It's, you get the participation in the survey that you might not get from other means, but it is a tool, like we mentioned before. It's one of the things, but I think, ¿y qué piensas sobre la reunión y la información en español y inglés?
Es muy importante que sea de una manera continua. Probablemente no todo el tiempo todo el mundo tiene esa fecha, ese horario, pero sí que se sepa que es continua la información y, como te comentaba, cosas simples como eso, así como una idea, un tip de la semana. ¿Tú sabes de esto? Que la policía puede ayudar a otro. O de por qué tú debes de no tirar basura, reciclar esto. Pues porque los mantos acuíferos se contaminan. Y eso está en la página. Y también otra cosa así simple. Tú sabes que la policía le pueden ayudar a poner el asiento del bebé en el coche correctamente, como tip de la semana o algo así.
It's an outreach and putting information out there, and we definitely have to get better at it. She said even the garbage disposal needs to be, so there's no issues amongst your neighbors, for people that may not know, or just moved into the row recently. But she said at times, I said, do you think members of the Hispanic community are aware of the complaint process? And her response said, I believe so, but maybe might be hesitant to report it or afraid. And that's, she said no clear reason as to why they might be afraid, but they might be afraid to report a complaint or an incident. I can tell you in my approximately 13 years, I've spoken to many individuals and provided them information. And I think that's part of the process, but our Hispanic outreach meetings are first, because I believe there wasn't trust established yet, was not well attended, and our second, third one, I think we had over 50 individuals on one. We actually had standing room only. We discussed important topics that affect the Hispanic community. Even, see, at the meeting setting, right, when we would have meetings, or even talk with a cow, some individuals might not be their platform to discuss issues they have, or incident, but I've noticed that with these community outreach events, coffee with cow, Hispanic outreach meetings, anything we've had, afterwards, I usually get a decent amount of requests for a meeting or discuss an issue with members from the Hispanic community. So it's something that we'll continue building on. And with her, Maria Rodriguez, who's unable to attend or running extremely late, they said it would help kind of get that information out there. So when we have meetings, I have social media partners that they can put it out there to all members, and we'll work on translating information. One of the key things you mentioned is putting information on a Teams basis so that little at a time, and the good things and things that we're working on, maybe information that comes out from the village hall, or sharing a lot of it and constant out that comes out from the village hall.
You mentioned the survey. Are you putting the survey out in the photo news where people can rip it out, fill it out, and mail it in, or is it only online?
It's only online
Because you're cutting out a portion of the community.
Oh, if you're doing your point earlier, what would be better if we did this earlier is maybe we need to get a story written and explain that this we only got 107 responses. I'd like to see 1,000. We encourage everybody to go to this, and if we need a hard copy, because obviously it's a lot of pages. So if we need a hard copy, we'd be glad to have it ready for you at Village Hall. But otherwise online, this is the link. If you just go to that, okay, there's your survey.
No, I was listening as you were talking about that, but the reason I ask is there is a portion of the community that, especially now during COVID, they're not coming to the village hall, and really, because of COVID, we're not encouraging people to come in, you can't get in. It's like Oz, you cannot get in to see Oz. So, and I think of my own mother. My mother does not go on the computer, she's not going out of the house, and she's not going to go to village hall, but she should have the opportunity to take part. And that's where she would see it. Even if she sees it in the photo news, that she can go to this website, you might as well tell her to go to Mars. Because she doesn't do that stuff.
So could she tear out of the photo news a request?
Yeah.
So you see a copy?
And then you can let.
That might work better, because there's so many questions that in other words, I was going to say all these, like, I don't know, COVID, but like all these volunteers need to do stuff. Let's just say, like, I would drive around and deliver them, like, there's just something.
And I think that would be awesome. We can actually find a way to connect with somebody in the community and talk about that.
I just wonder, because as I was listening, I'm thinking there is a portion of the community that
Is it on?
Well, I'd like to
we're
see
excluding, inadvertently we're excluding.
There were 0 people under the age of 17. I'd like to see younger people do it too, that you think would be the savvy ones that
So you know what I think we do?
nobody answered.
Right, I think what we need to do is we need to do a video blurb to that demographic, right? Because that's what they're doing social
Yeah.
platforms, so we'll figure that out. Let's capture the ones that are on this, and then let's try to capture the ones that Nancy's referring to as well. Let's really make that effort.
One of our panel members, Abraham.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think that's a great opportunity to kind of reinvigorate this process.
No, I know, it's true. My
Maybe
mom
more
wouldn't
people engaged.
answer anything online, she wouldn't even know how to do it. Yeah.
It's a very good point. There's a lot of seniors especially.
Yeah, that aren't on those.
Don't go on.
We can't even capture them at the senior center.
I was just going to say, you can't even get them
Not even
in
there.
because they're going through, because that's one of her.
Yes, they
connections.
wait for Mel to come.
It's a connection to the community.
Yeah, I agree.
And the chief was asking about
Yes, there's something
complaint.
in the town hall, or?
I think one of the big things that stand in the way is fear of retaliation.
Right.
If I complain about my traffic ticket, I'm getting arrested.
Okay.
And it's a valid concern. And it's not like you can go to your neighbor and say, well, you complained, what happened? So there's a trust piece to that. And that's a really hard barrier to get over. I was saying, I think part of the problem with the complaint, if you have a complaint, is fear of retaliation.
Okay, we would expect clearly better from our officers, but I would realize that someone may still feel that. And that's part of the trust and transparency and the community understanding that if a complaint is filed, we're going to thoroughly investigate it. And it may uncover that the officer did not follow our policies and procedures, or it might be a misunderstanding. But it's important for the public to feel comfortable and find a complaint. That's right. Just like we get a lot of members of the public that commend our officers. We get it on, I would say, probably on a monthly basis. We just got one recently. And that's probably another aspect, especially during COVID-19, our response to calls to include our birthday drive-bys and our community awards that we received with the school district, Community Connection Award. With those acknowledgements, it's also important for us to recognize when we're not at our best, and that's part of accountability. And that's why I think this reform will identify areas that we need to improve, and this is the start of what's going to be the norm for us, which will be possibly monthly or quarterly community meetings. And when people come out in large numbers at a community meeting, I have to imagine that we're not at our best. If it did happen, I'm just using this scenario. But I can tell you that we have a very selective hiring process in terms of interest in the position generally. We've discussed civil service, but we've all transferred from another police department. But the men and women in the Monroe Police Department are always looking to do better. It starts with me now, and they have to believe in our missions and our goals. And I think training and education is also another thing. I know in other meetings we've discussed training, said procedural justice, de-escalation, defensive tactics. Just to name a few, cultural awareness training. Those will be a yearly or annual training that we're going to look to do, because I think training provides, you get a better product. If you go to the range several times a year versus one time a year, you're probably going to perform better or be more accurate, and even with training. And there's always policies, themes, or topics that evolve or change with time. Every year, we went through discovery and bail reform with all of our policies, and use of force, review your policy, and we just continue moving. And right now, at the end of March, we will have New York State come as part of our re-accreditation process. They're going to come down and review our files. And accreditation, as we mentioned before, is voluntary. We've been accredited since 2001. And they don't just take your word for it and say, well, you have a use of force policy, notification, duty to intervene. They may select that policy and say, show me 10 examples of this incident, or notification of administration or internal affairs investigation. They want you to produce those documents. They're just not going to say, Monroe Police Department, or we trust what they're doing. It's essentially an outside agency, a state agency, that is assuring that we're complying with the best practices of policing. And it's been, I know agencies that I've spoken to, and they're reviewing their policies. We review our policies at least once a year, and we continue to look for ways to change them and update them so that we're keeping up with modern policing and what would be the best. And with our, just to go back up again, mentioned the complaint, with the panel, upon reviewing the complaint form, and where I mentioned we have it currently on our webpage to include in our police department. Would the panel say that that meets the needs of the community at this point? Or is there, would someone review it and look at it? And if everyone is comfortable in terms of our personnel complaint process or any change that we should look at, then we can always either table it and take notes, or we can always change emails or pass along information prior to our next meeting, or do research or do some homework and go from there.
As far as accessibility to the documents, it's there, it's, we're finding either on the webpage or the lobby of the police department. Somebody mentioned before, as far as the biggest fear, and that's with any police department, is it's always the fear of retaliation. Whether it's a real fear or not, people may have that feeling for whatever reason. I noticed on the complaint page, and it's very difficult to get around it, is name of the complainant, address, home telephone number, things of that nature. And I know it's very difficult to take the complaint as an anonymous complainant. I know that's one of the things that we always did in the city. It was if the person didn't want to give their name, they did not have to. They didn't have to give a callback number. We always encouraged them to provide their information when they didn't have to. The complaint would still be investigated thoroughly. I think what makes it, in the current climate, a lot easier to investigate those alleged anonymous complaints are the body cameras. If somebody says that an incident happened on February 24th at 8 p.m. at this location, well, then you can go back to the body camera footage during the course of the anonymous complaint investigation and review that incident to, in fact, see if there was any protocols or policies that were not adhered to. That's opening up a whole other door as far as body cameras
that's something
and things
that
like that. I don't want to open that up.
It's something that is one of the topics discussed in the guidebook for police reform. It's a topic that we know it's here.
Chief, I just wanted to bring out 2 points before we go into that. Based on something I heard trust before. Uber had said last meeting, trust is delivering on promises. And I think that's absolutely true, right? So as we build that, and we just talked about what Nancy just said, that fear of reprisal, and Stephen just talked about the anonymous piece of that. The trust is built immediately if somebody who says, I have a complaint that I'd like to express, and you take that information, but I don't want to give you my name or any of my contact information, and you investigate it, and then return that information, however you do that with that anonymous person, however you communicate that. Maybe there's just a phone number, I don't know. But whatever you do, I think that builds that trust. I think that says, I did check it out, I did look into it, and here's what I found. Would you like to discuss it further? I think that builds it. And I think that's done in very short order. I think people want to trust. I think we're built that way. I don't think we're built to distrust. I think we're built to trust. We want to.
Yeah, but as you can see, on page 2, we do receive anonymous complaints. There's received complaints. Complaints regardless of the nature can be lodged in person by email, by telephone, or written communication at any time. As part of the follow-up investigative activity, person making a complaint by mail or telephone would normally be interviewed and a written signed complaint prepared. A complaint form is found attached to this board. Anonymous complaints of corruption, brutality, serious injury, criminal misconduct, etc. will be handled as an internal affairs function. Anonymous complaints of less serious nature, such as officer rudeness and sensitivity, will be documented and placed in the internal investigation file according to Records Management General Order 50. So we would document it, and I say at the previous meetings that if it is alleged criminal conduct, we will incorporate the assistance of the Orange County Superior Office. I know it's a little bit more officer involved shooting than on our office. It will be in the near future Attorney General's office. But now, if it's alleged that's a criminal matter, we would initiate an investigation and turn it over to the Orange County District Attorney's Office, and they would possibly ask the assistance of the New York State Police or possibly the New York State Attorney General's office. But it would definitely, that partnership, or you know, it would be two separate, as I mentioned in the previous meeting, two separate investigations. One would be administratively on our end to see where our policies or procedures were violated, and the second would be possibly a criminal investigation based on allegations that were brought before the officer. But that's part of trust and transparency. We would accept and will continue to accept anonymous complaints. But it's one thing is to have the community feel comfortable enough to make one of those complaints. And that's part of overall, you know, what we said, outreach, community policing, trust, transparency, procedural justice. Some of the key information that we go to is listening, neutrality in terms of treating everyone fairness, and just transparency. You know, telling them, I think people should understand that we have mentioned would respect and trust the process more if they know that they're being treated fairly, they were allowed to say or explain themselves,
Right.
and that they were treated equally based on any race, ethnicity, religion. Putting that aside, they're treated equally, and it's one of the important aspects that we look at to make sure we're meeting the needs of the community and where we can change. And you know, with personnel complaint forms and our investigation in GEO that we did discuss here, if there was a complaint made and it was not somehow reported to me, or somehow was not disseminated or made into it, then that in itself would be a violation of order. So if anyone tried to discuss the situation with someone or try to get them away from making a complaint, then that would be a violation for the individual that did that. It's another officer or the sergeant, but it's something that it's part of policing. Most of our interactions are very positive, but we're not always right. And I know that, you know, a lot of things that has to do with training, education, sometimes it becomes a disciplinary matter. There's a time and place for any of those. You know, not saying there's a step that you take and you progress. Many times it is, but it depends on the severity. You may not be able to do that, and you might have to move quickly towards, you know, getting counsel involved. I mentioned at the first meeting, depending on the conduct that's alleged, the village board will be made notified. The attorney for the village, the district attorney's office, will be made aware. So that's, you know, it's in our policy. It's something we're adhere to, and it's important for us to recognize when we're right, but also to be transparent when we're wrong.
I said it one time, I understand anonymous complaints, but that's a double-edged sword. Because if somebody gives you an anonymous complaint, they don't see any results, but it just feeds into their fears that if I would have used my name, nothing would have been done. Right? If you get an anonymous complaint, you said to the district attorney, these are not the prosecutor, that's it, it's over. Nobody knows, or if nobody knows what action was taken in the public record, that just feeds into their fear.
Well, I think in the future with policing and body cams, I looked at a recent study in 2016. There was approximately 47% of police departments in the U.S. that had body cams. We've looked at estimates, looked at information, software, data, and we think and it's something that would that be a short-term goal or a long-term or mid-range goal for what we look to build our plan for in terms of body cams. You know, we look at it as a future of policing. It's just, you know, it's what is there an immediate need? We're at a stage right now of obtaining information, vetting vendors, or right now we have 2 that we received information on from Axon and Axis, 2 separate companies, and we are in the process of looking at cost, because it is substantial, and within certain storage, you look at it, and I just think of it if you won't always capture everything, you look at sporting events, there's times that they have 8 different angles just to capture, football or basketball, they just capture one thing, but if that increases transparency and trust, which another recent study put approximately 80% of officers, or I believe it was higher than that, support body cams. So it's not a resistance from the rank and file. It is more of a cause and need in the community or the police department, and in what the community views as body cams and the value that they bring. It's another tool we mentioned for transparency and trust, but I'm interested to pose a question to the panel to see if we should look closer into how we can incorporate the future of body cams in policing in our plan.
I think when body cams first came out, most rank and file police officers were dead against it, myself included. And having been on the investigation end and pulling those body cams and reviewing 911 call responses, complaints against police officers, things of that nature, it actually became a defensive tool for the police to dispel these false allegations and such. And I think it completely it shifted the tide as far as most cops now promote them, they want them. It's just a positive thing now.
Yeah,
And I think back to Wayne, what you were saying as far as a anonymous complaint, once the implementation, if it were to go in that direction, were be to have body cameras in the department, then an individual can feel comfortable making an anonymous complaint, and you can go right to that date, time, location of footage, whether it be a dash cam, whether it be a body cam, whatever it might be, and that police officer is obligated to turn on that body camera when he or she steps out of the vehicle. And failure to do so in and of itself would generally be a violation of the public safety.
Do we have cameras in cars?
No, I believe many years ago, I'm going back approximately 15 years. We did, there became an issue once again with replacement of equipment that becomes outdated, storage. There's a couple variables that you would want to consider, but dash cams, we do not currently have one in our vehicles.
I'm wondering what the cost would be. I love the idea of body cams, I'm just wondering what the cost would be. Because I would assume each officer would have their own.
Yes.
And then how many officers do we have?
We have 19 full-timers and 5 part-time officers assigned to the schools. So that's our role. And some policies that have been under review incorporate a partnership with the school district to include the use of the body cam while they're in the school, and redacting information or faces as needed. If it's a situation, some would be not to have.
Would there be like a grant or something to get for the?
Yes, there's actually, I'm not sure if it's still, I remember approximately 6 to 8 months ago, district attorney Dave Hubler offered assistance in paying for the body cam, which is one aspect of it. Your body cam itself, the actual camera, could be approximately $600 to $800 for the camera itself.
The big cost is storage.
Yes, you have storage, you have, the docs, the redacting of information. So you have to come with a thorough and comprehensive policy to make sure that you're utilizing the body cam as a tool the best possible effect that it should have, and then it has to do with transparency and trust. And a lot of officers, you mentioned that I've spoken to, or police chiefs in the county and surrounding counties, at first they were hesitant. It's a new item, a new thing, and then they slowly realized that if someone makes an allegation against them and it's unjust, then they would be exonerated. But on the other end, for the public, which is the key to it, is transparency and trust, where I know that when there's a critical incident, and I've seen nationally and even in New York State, first thing is they're looking body cam footage. And sometimes the body cam tells a good portion of the story, and other times it does not totally tell. Yeah, you just have some angles.
It's a great defense tool. In the ambulances, we have dash cams. We've had a complaint before, they weren't found, and I reviewed the case.
Absolutely.
That's happened.
And I think that's what's coming from the police department. What I've seen in my experience in the police department is individuals saying to the police officer's face, I'm going to say that you stole my money and you hit me, and okay, no problem, talk to the camera.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they freeze and walk away.
And now that would be ideal, considering we're now meeting and having discussions regarding in the near future workshop for our budget. So with the information that we're receiving from the two vendors that are well known and established here in the county and the Hudson Valley area, it would be important for us, see what time period we would be able to order, obtain, and train personnel, have a policy, have either sergeants or administrative sergeant as well to review it. So there's a lot of components that go with the body cam, but it appears to be at this point the norm or the future. It's not already now. More and more agencies are going to it. They at this point, I believe, have about within a year or 2 years of going to it. So that's one of the items that have definitely been a topic of conversation for police reform, as well as some of the other ones clearly that we discussed recently in the last 3 meetings.
Chief, can we move on to the report of Griffins report? Page 5,
I know we discussed about data and information that goes out to the public. We're working on an annual report. I know our presentation contained a lot of information. My question is, the annual report, what are some of the statistics that you feel the community would most care? Obviously, we have our calls for service, our investigations, our arrests, any highlights for the year, manpower, rank structure, some of the things that we have in our presentation. But with our annual report that we would look to complete in the near future, is there certain information, especially taking in mind police reform, that and for the community would be interested in having?
Something I noticed at the first meeting we had, when it was virtual, when you put up the number of calls for service for the year, it was a daunting number until you break out how many of those calls are premise checks.
Yes.
They're not criminal complaints.
No.
They're just encounters. And I think that number needs a really strong explanation, a breakdown. Because you had like 20,000 incidents.
Yes, we've had approximately, and that includes anything from, are you okay?
Right, it's a phone call, it's a premise check.
Premise checks, car stops, and the list goes on and on for anything. And that's why I mentioned to the one gentleman that had said, do you document your car stops? I think you mentioned, do you break it down or are they documented? Absolutely, they are. Every single one of our interactions regarding car stops or members' calls for service are all documented and applied. And going to 21,000, you break down our either proactive or premise checks that you mentioned, or assist other agencies, that's all included in that number.
But when you take a look at that number, 21,000 incidents sounds very different than 21,000 incidents. 300 of them are arrests.
And that can have a trickle-down effect also, like question 26, do you feel the level of crime in the neighborhood has, and 12.61% said increased. Where are they basing that? It's just their feeling, or is it they're looking at the number of response of incident calls, 21,000? That's a lot of calls.
Yeah. And we historically document every call. We go to every medical call. Most of us are EMTs. It's a program we've discussed before and we really believe in. We've had life-saving awards through trooper officers, I think on a daily basis, with Mark and other, emergency interventions. Like you mentioned, if we have approximately 21,000 calls, which is low, there's cities that, or bigger towns that don't have that many. It's just been a process of ours documenting everything. There's so many issues that we not do a blotter or incident report for a car stop. We've always done it. It makes it easier to track or look into certain events, but it does also present a picture that.
And it's great to document everything, but it could also give a false misconception of that they're all criminal related, which
So
they're
maybe,
not, clearly not.
yes, so maybe in our annual report, our calls and service, maybe we would break down call type to go into, every call type, or at least the majority of the major call types that would combine or equal to approximately 21,000 calls for service. In terms of demographics or other information use of force or statistics that we've discussed at our police reform meetings, there are certain statistics that you feel would make the report more either transparent or better serve the community. Because right now I can tell you on our annual report that we have and we're cost completed, we have our organization chart, we have our programs that we're part of, we mentioned most of them already, training that we conduct, partnerships that we have, any highlights for the year, any retirements, any hires, and towards the end, we just had our department activity based on arrests, calls for service, citations, use of force incident. We're in the process of our use of force incident in our graph to break down by gender and race. If everyone feels that might be or any information that's missing from it, please let me know so we can have a thorough, detailed annual report that everyone will look at and say, okay, this has a lot of useful and important information. But that's something that we can always follow up on at a later time if that's better to just understand annual reports. It's something that the annual report itself we did. I believe some agencies do it, some don't. It's not something that's uniformed and policed, but it's something that we could look into and finalize. We're ready until we compile most of the information. We just wanted to get the input from the panel, see for the report. Actually, I was just going to say one thing. I know it's been a long evening for everyone, and I just wanted to confirm if we're covering and where we are with our review, and if there's something that we can discuss or exchange emails. For the most part, everything that we have worked on now, including our policies, including our discussions that we've had, we're going to get public, but at this point, at our third meeting, have we identified certain topics and issues that will be part of our plan that we can start drafting or start working on in terms of some of the topics we discussed, community policing, training, hiring,
Visual contact.
body cams. Some of those topics, I really wanted the panel to think more into our focus that we had mentioned, so that we are, articles covering everything as part of police reform to make sure we didn't leave stone unturned or any information we should relay or anything we should have gone more into detail, but also to just confirm that we have identified or will continue to identify areas that we should look at and look at as part of incorporating our plan. Because we had Mayor, you can confirm our timeline that we're looking for to include offline, conversations or exchanging information regarding our meeting, possible next week. We if I'm correct,
Next week, I'd like to put out the.
we would like to at the next meeting, that would be our final committee meeting in regards to discussing the topics. And at this point, besides we discuss some more training and continuing education, support officer wellness and well-being, recruiting diverse workforce. I think we've covered most of it, but I just want to make sure that not only bringing our members that are already able to attend up to date, but also making sure that I can tell you that this is I mentioned prior to you, it's a bottom-up approach right, for the plan. It has to come from the community, and we have to continue to receive feedback through survey, through any emails that might come to Village Hall or meetings and public comment. But we want to make sure that we've identified areas that we can address them or find. And I can tell you, there's certain things that I've noticed from these reviews and these meetings that we can improve on as a police department. And I haven't worked it out. And once the panel is able to provide additional insights as to what the recommendations are, we can always just discuss them all as one open discussion.
Yeah, so Chief and the committee as well, I'd say next week as opposed to every 2 weeks because we're getting down to that period where we need to start summarizing and putting a set of recommendations together. So I think what I'd like the committee, if they're willing to do, is consider next Wednesday possible to meet here just the same way again, try to wrap up this year, this work, and then also offline, or if we want to have an exchange, I think that's totally appropriate, where we could actually, comment as to previous discussed aspect or what we have in the last page and a half here, notations so that we could actually try to wrap it up and build a report that we then would go to the committee as a final and say, okay, so we see these, and then I think we need to put some goals in place, whether it's immediate, midterm, and long-term goals, and then we can get it out to the public.
Yes, and I did phase 3, which phase where you're preparing to draft the plan, to identify areas of focus after evaluating the current state of your law enforcement agency and getting feedback, identify what issues or areas that are needed to change. Breaking down, organizing issues to be addressed, allows decisions to be made in a more manageable way. Identify measurable goals and areas identified as needed reform. Identify what success will look like in short and long term. Articulating measurable goals will help focus your policy deployment, allowing all stakeholders to assess outcomes and identify needed adjustments in the future. Same draft of reform and reinvention plan. There's no specific guidance, it's just saying basically use the format that works well best for your community and your police department. And the next step would be that our draft plans released or posted for public comment. That could be at a meeting, and our panel members can listen to other input that might come in from Village of Monroe community members or community stakeholders, and we could answer those either as a panel, or if anyone wants to complete or articulate, we could always do that. But it has to be open to public comment, so that besides the survey, besides the questions that or answers or comments were accepted, and besides our first meeting that was open for public comment, they're engaged and they know what our plan looks like. So in the event that something that we should have maybe looked into, we can take that into consideration. And
So-
then we'll have to, I'm sorry, I was saying regarding the time period, next week, we were able to meet at the same time, would be our final meeting in terms of for committee. We can work on drafting a plan, present ideas either before the meeting or afterwards, and then we would look to have a public comment, either meeting or on Zoom or in person, have public comment. But we would also accept written comments via email, via mail, if they wanted to send a letter. We would incorporate that into our final plan that would have to be ratified by the village board of trustees and the mayor.
And I think to Nancy's point, so we would do the same thing in the photo news as well. So if you want to view this, if you want to understand this, let's give you a platform, whatever that may be, to try to encourage you to go online, or if you want a set of the proposed action plan for the village of Montrose, please inform. Let us know, we'll mail you a copy, we'll do something so you feel like you're part of the solution. I think that's.
And short and long-term goals are incredible, because that would help, something we could address overnight, something we need some further
Chief,
time.
if you could go ahead and give the board that template, give me your concerns, give me your short, medium, long-term goals that you see.
Oh, what I've seen, yes, I see certain changes,
Giving the committee so that they know.
and outreach, and I know the reports to community policing, I know the reports to trust, and those are all ways that I've recognized through our meetings and evaluations and survey input, ways we can increase. But I would share them along with the other panel recommendations, and we all have the same position, I would say, in this meeting, in this, we're all stakeholders, or we're all invested in looking for the best possible outcome for the police. And I told the mayor, and I told the board when I was hired there, my goal is to clearly provide the best possible public service to the Village of Monroe residents and the community. And it's something that I believe reform is going to make it better. And this is something that some will say, that it's long overdue, but it's here, and we accept it, and we know we're going to make changes. And I had said previously to the mayor and board members that with our community police initiatives in the past, and our policies and accreditation, and some of the other items that we have discussed in great detail, that we feel that we're providing a good service, but there's always room for improvement, and that's where we respect everyone's information, their time, more so than anything else, but your input as well. And we look forward to working on a plan together. It's your input is as valuable as anything that I would have to say. It has to come from the community.
Does next Wednesday go?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So I'll go ahead and get a memo out to everybody that we'll do it next Wednesday at 7 o'clock as well. Does 7 o'clock work, by the way? Yeah. So at 7 o'clock, we'll do that, and then Chief, you're going to send out some comments about what you expect from us as far as getting back, if there's any information. I mean, obviously, I'm telling you all right now, it's a matter of putting in all your pieces, all those parts that are going to help make this a really robust.
And there's no, and I've said this a few times, first, second page is no one size fits all for their community has different needs. But we definitely know we've identified certain needs or ways to improve through those of the
Absolutely.
This worksheet that I provided with the guiding questions, that was directly pulled from here. It wasn't something that, if you look at the table of contents, that is essentially the guideline that we've been following. If you look at the topics and the subtopics, and then you go into the book, which the book is on our webpage. Also, it was distributed they're in constant contact, also on the
Yes.
village website. If you ever want to reference it, but the bullets, and the questions that pertain to each topic or issues, those were incorporated into the worksheet. So it kind of just helps start a dialogue or continue a path for certain topics.
Okay.
I know that along any questions or anything else, or we can always exchange emails or any information during the week.
I think that's a good idea.
All right,
Anybody got Jasmine? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we all should do the same thing, kind of circle around that and just really have an opportunity to kind of open up about whatever's on our minds and take all this information. There's a lot to take in. I like the idea of keeping that thing moving and alive. You know, Wayne said twice a year. I think that's a great idea. You know, and obviously it is going to be a moving target. As we're successful here, maybe we have one moving year. There are short, mid-term, and long-term goals. Right? So I think this is good. Well, thank you all. I appreciate it. Well, taking the time.
It's actually
Yeah, it means a lot.
Thank you.